All right, straight into it. No drop whatsoever. Because this is an occasion. This is an occasion right here. We have the reunion of
It's a thing.
Mike Kiser. Welcome, sir, to the pod.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
I'll give you a pass.
Wow.
So, for the new followers who aren't familiar with our work, Mike and I used to host the Sell Point podcast, Mistaken Identity, for a couple of years, 3 seasons.
Yeah.
3 seasons. So, of course, I had to have him come in now as a special guest to this podcast. This edition of Cocktails with Dave, as we are quarantining, as most of us are now here in Austin, Texas. And today we actually have cocktails. So I will say this: part of what hurt the podcast the most when COVID started was I kind of lost the cocktail part of my podcast because it was in person. We'd order a cocktail, things of that nature. Doing these things remote and catching up with people at different times.
That's what I heard.
I'm sorry. But today we do the cocktails. I have a special bartender special. It has no name yet. It was just concocted and made today. I don't even remember what's in it. I just know the base is tequila and it's really good. So
is it the only alcohol in it is tequila? Probably.
Yeah, and then Midori, but I don't know if that's.
Well, that's complicated.
Yeah.
It feels. Does it have an umbrella in it? I don't see an umbrella.
We don't have any umbrellas. Right? It's got the round umbrella. We don't have any umbrellas.
Wow.
Okay, so for those that don't know you, Mike, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Wow, that's something. Who am I? I'm Mike Kiser, man about town, wearer of many hats, ne'er-do-well. No, I've been identity security for like 20 years, something like that, off and on. Did coding early on, did some verification early on. Was at IBM for about 16 years and then switched. Well, right before I switched, I went and got a theology degree in North Texas.
There you go.
I'm actually ordained, so it's a little bit different. Don't let that bias anybody. And then I switched to SailPoint. Still do identity, still do security, just with more expensive degrees.
Right. Yeah. And theology. Do you do theology at SailPoint too? Is that?
Only on the side. Right. Only on a pro bono basis. No. Yeah, not really.
Cool.
Not yet.
One of the things that I always find interesting in that as I've been talking to people is just their journey into like identity and security, right? Because nobody starts and says, this is what I want to do. Like, because it didn't really exist when for most of the people, my peers in our generation, like that, this wasn't a field. It just kind of came about. So talk to a little bit like how you stumbled into the world of kind of cybersecurity and identity.
Oh gosh. Well, growing up, I was astrophysics. Was going to be this long-term plan, let's just say. I was going to do some type of military academy to get into the space program. And then after I got out of that, I go into politics. Long story. University. I kind of got to university. I was like, wait, I was told there'd be no math. Not really. But things changed. And I flipped to computer science after a year or two. And then, because I'd always done computers, that kind of stuff. And started doing software coming out of university. I wasn't looking for identity. Right. Security was more interesting than identity and still is to some degree, but they're blending the two at this point. But did things off and on. But that was back in the day of, new internet, 98, 99, 2000, where no one really knew what they were doing anyway. Standards? What are standards? Right.
What we're doing now?
Right, exactly. And so over time drifted and gravitated towards identity in general, just in part because of default, in part because it was kind of all encompassing in the long term anyway, especially if you don't just focus on enterprise identity. And oddly enough, those two worlds, Like, so people joke that whether I'm doing, technology or theology, I'm still messing with identity anyway, which is irony in the extreme. But yeah, anyway.
That is strangely true.
Yes, but it's a weird, like everybody, it's a weird meandering path, right? They have those degrees now, like the University of Texas has an identity degree,
right?
But I don't even know what they teach in that class.
Is there? That's the only one I've seen. Are there any more? I would assume somebody else.
I don't think so. There's got to be something, right? Yeah. But full-fledged masters, I don't think so. I don't know. Yeah. But that was after our time anyway. So
right. It would be interesting to see. You know what? And we had a we had a meetup. We had an identity meetup about that, and we had the folks from the Texas program talk about it. And that just brought it back to mind. I need to follow up and connect them. We need to get that connection between ID Pro and them to kind of understand like what they're teaching, because a lot of the stuff that ID Pro wants to do eventually wants to lead to like certification and things of that nature.
Yeah.
Probably, now that I think about it, host another meetup considering like we're.
Well, it's been harder, right? And everyone's zoomed out.
Right.
Thank you for not using Zoom on this broadcast. It's just, it's refreshing to see a different interface. It's a little things. It's the little things.
Yeah. So for the local identity pros, we've not forgotten about you. We've kind of just accidentally forgotten about you. So we're gonna have to get back to that at some point. There was absolutely no plan for this podcast because it's you, Mike. So we were just gonna
that's fine.
Bring up some random different topics. Speaking of which, Identiverse, did you check out any of the content today on Identiverse?
No, I was building IKEA furniture half of today.
Okay, wait a minute. What'd you get?
I got 260 pounds of outdoor furniture because it's so cold in Texas now. It's just lovely to sit outside. When I ordered it, it was like mid-May. So to my credit, it was viable back then. Took a month and a half or something, but it's here. And so I've been doing that. I missed I wanted to tune into Ian's thing, but I had a work call anyway. What did you listen to it? Did you turn into it?
So I only watched maybe about like 5 or 6 minutes of it. My budding career as a financial coach and advisor kicked in. I had to sit down and work with a client, and I was like, I really wanted to listen to this. So I listened to a little bit of it, and I immediately said, okay, I'm gonna mark this to come back and watch it tonight, because he started the area where I perked up was he was talking about where he saw the internet going, and he had this slide where he was like, there's basically, he thinks there's going to be 3 internets, one for China, one for Russia, and then one for everybody else. And he started talking about how the whole idea that we say in the enterprise, like that identity is the new perimeter. He believes that identity will be the perimeter for internet, period, like going forward, right? As he started to kind of look at that. And so, and at that point I was just like, wow. And I was like, all right, I'm going to need to like pause this, because I really want to watch it and kind of take notes, and then, pester him later about all of it. But it looked really interesting, kind of his thought process around that. So I missed the other ones, but that was the main one. Radiant Logic actually had a case study, I believe, with Verizon Media.
Mm-hmm.
They did
with Fletcher.
I'm not sure if Fletcher is one or not. But I definitely want to check this. The good thing is all the Identiverse sessions are on demand about 30 to 40 minutes afterwards.
Okay, so that's reassuring.
Yeah, you just have to go, like when you go to the register, when it listed, you have to scroll all the way down. The ones that have passed are at the bottom, and then you just click.
Like anything, it's learning the interface, right?
Yeah.
To get into your session the other day, it was already going on, but I had to search for it because since it already started, it had kicked down to the bottom or something. Anyway.
Yeah.
Search is my friend.
It does that too. Like, because that's when I went to go look for Ian's, it was like 11:02. I was just like, I'm 2 minutes late. Like, where is it? Like, and then I had to scroll all the way down and find it. So,
but identity as the new, but only one for China, one for Russia, and one for the States.
Well, no. So it was one for China, one for Russia, and then one for everybody else.
Huh.
Right? So, and I didn't. I didn't watch it long enough for him to go into his rationale for it. So it's gonna be interesting. I'm really itching to do that. Instead of watching Netflix tonight, I'll be watching Ian Glaber's talk. So there you go, Ian. Choosing you over Netflix, buddy.
I could do both at the same time.
Probably.
You know, I mean, just have a soundtrack in the background.
Right. There's so many cocktails out
there. It's weird to have it so spread out. It's weird to have it over 2 or 3 weeks.
It's 8 weeks.
It's 8 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
That's crazy.
Right? Okay, hold on. I think I'm.
No, I believe you. I remember it was really spread out, which I think makes production so much easier. For everybody.
Right. So I'm gonna put these into almost positive it's 8 weeks. But the cool thing about it, like, and I was kind of saying this yesterday, like you get a chance to really, it's 8 weeks, all the way up to August 7th.
Wow.
Right. And what they did is it's 2 per day.
Yeah. It's low key.
Yeah.
Maybe a little more.
Yeah, there's some media ones in there. So yeah, it's nice. It's spread out. The fact that it's on demand, right? So people can watch it later. But I think my point was, I feel like with this, and since they did it 8 weeks, I know that Ian said in the ID Pro Slack channel afterwards, he would hop in and do a Q&A. But I really think it would be good to have like these little pop-up sessions where people can all get together and kind of talk about it, because I think it's going to bring a lot of that conference feel to it. And because it's so spread out, there's a lot of opportunities there to do that. Right. So I hope that as it goes on, like more and more people, some of the speakers do some of that, like ask me anything afterwards and stuff like that or whatever, because that'd be really cool. We could really start to get, I would say, people who are on the fringe of identity who are like, oh, there's some good things now that it's free. Like people try a lot more things when it's free. Right. There might be people I'd never go to Identiverse before because I'm not that much in identity, but now it's like it's free. Well, okay. Let me go.
It's free and they don't have to travel.
Yes.
Right. Every group is finding, the fear was, oh, no one's going to come in or no one's going to participate. And then I think other, groups are finding out that it gives more access to people. If you think of someone who's homebound or in prison or, depends on the access, but like if they are physically unable to leave their location, then this levels the playing field in ways that hadn't before, which is weird.
Yeah, I think, I've mentioned this before, talking to other couple of guys. I'm looking at this, and I don't think conferences will ever be the same after this, right? Like I think we're going to, regardless. Let's fast forward 5 years, right? We figured this whole thing out, and kind of go back to quote unquote some kind of normalcy. But you start to look at the efficiency of running one of these conferences, right? Like I have no clue how much it costs to rent out some of these places and all this stuff or whatever, and productions. If you don't have anything to do and you can just kind of do this, like I think that leaves you a lot of room to start doing a lot more interactive things and getting a little innovative with how conferences are done.
Potentially, right? But if people go back to work, people go back to offices, then you're not the ability to, I'm just going to check out for even half a day and ignore everything that's going on. It's more difficult.
Right.
I don't know. And the other thing I would argue is that there is still a barrier to entry. I know I just said the opposite, but you know me. That having broadband internet access is not equality, right? It is a huge caste system de facto, right? And if you have a great internet connection, you're living in a particular spot in the world, and if you have that, you're more likely to be able to work from home and keep your job and keep communications going, which gives you all the benefits you expect, right? Affluence, education for your kids, health, usually health, not always. It's not a guarantee, but if you isolate yourself, I've got some friends that didn't quite work out, but that's all right.
You know what? That is, as I would expect nothing less of you, Mike Kiser, that is a very interesting perspective and point that even I had overlooked. Like I'm just so, the internet has basically always been a commodity to me. Like it's not even a thing. I was just like, all right, like I'm gonna have it. But to your point, I have been, fortunate enough to work in the field where the cost of it, no matter what it was, even though I might complain, at the end of the day, it was still something that I could afford to pay for. So, and then I'm in, a place in the world, a country where for the most part, high speeds are fairly available no matter where I'm at. Right. I mean, there's some rural areas it's a little tougher, but that is an actual valid point. And I kind of start, what as you're saying, I start thinking about the whole, even now, as a lot of companies, with the pandemic have been forced to kind of work from home, things like that. A lot of companies saying, hey, this is great. Let's do this. And there's been conversations of like, will commercial real estate ever be the same now? Because, will these big companies need to go and buy out these huge buildings to fill in work as people can work from home? But it goes back to, okay, yeah, but internet's not necessarily a commodity, right? Or it's not.
And even if you,
access to.
right. And even if you have access, it doesn't necessarily mean you can pay for it.
Right.
It's like a chicken and egg thing then, right? Like if I don't have high speed access, if we're doing it all online, for instance, right, then if I've got the bandwidth, then we can have this conversation, for example, you and me. But if I was, just couldn't, if I was on a very limited network bandwidth, then at the very least, even if it's subtle too, right? Because even if I'm pixelated, even if I break up, that's going to make it hard for you to hear, hard for you to buy into whatever I'm saying.
Right.
Just weakens my whole argument, which is why I have a T1 line going to my house. It's the only way I can be viable in this society, but still, no, you know what I mean? No, it's fascinating. I mean, we've all been those places, those hotel, wherever, far-flung location, and you're like, this is ridiculous. Well, if that was your experience, then
and for me, it's always, it was like, this is ridiculous. But this is also a great excuse. Well, I'm not working today. Sorry, couldn't make that meeting. Guess I'm calling.
We're done here. Right. And it wasn't, this one wasn't as important before the pandemic, right? Like if I had access, fine. If I didn't, that's all right. But yeah, it's fascinating.
Yeah. And it also reminds me, like, so when I went to, this was years ago, and I don't know when I went to Australia, it was very interesting, like something is like cell phones, right? So we had unlimited plans in the US forever. Like, so there was no more like, you don't have to track how you were using your phone, or, I mean, yes, if you have like a family, like you had to look at data somewhat, but for the most part, you're okay. But it was funny, this was in 2015, like, and I was looking to get a cell phone there, like the plans were much more data restricted, right? So they still did, the concept of limited was not a thing. So it was just kind of like, all right, well, which plan do I get? And it was for me, it was like going back to like 1995, where I had to like monitor. Okay, let me not.
I gotta go. Only got 5 minutes left. Let's go.
Because, and like I had to like change the patterns of how I use my phone to make sure that I would get through all the data that I had for a month, right? And granted, I mean, you could go over, but the costs weren't ridiculous. Like, back in the day when you used to run over your minutes on your cell phone bill and you had like a $10,000 bill, but it was still pretty, prohibitive, where it's like, so I think about things like that in other countries where, like, again, the bandwidth's not there, the concept of unlimited, like, so it's interesting that I'll do some research on it to see like what has been the impact of that as we've globally, companies have had to go, okay, we're going to do the work from home thing. Like, how has that impacted, infrastructure? How has that impacted places where, bandwidth wasn't as great, and what have they done to kind of counteract some of that? So
I was I was in London in 2006 or something. Normal mobile phone plan. I was there for the week. And back in the day, I'm going to sound old, but that's okay. Back in the day, you bought an international plan with a certain amount of data that you blow through, but you bought it, right?
Right.
Well, this one particular week in London, I forgot to buy one ahead of time. And so I get a text on Thursday from AT&T, and they said, by the way, we've noticed some international data usage. You might want to check, your usage pattern. So I pulled it up on my phone, still using data, by the way, $14,000.
Oh,
I kid you not. My sister-in-law who I was with, she said later on, I just turned like totally stone-faced because I'm just like, so I call them up and they let me buy it retroactively. But for like 10 minutes, I was like, what? Like that's, I could have bought a car. I could, but no, you're right. It's totally a thing. I don't think anyone's doing anything, to be honest.
Right.
Because you have to have money to do something about it. And the people who are deprived, they don't have money. You want to hear my latest shtick? My latest shtick.
Okay, here we go.
Is that this is just like the color blue, believe it or not. The color blue wasn't popular. It's the world's most popular color now. Like, in fact, I think some kind of blue was Pantone's color of the year for 2020. God help them. But before, like, until the high Middle Ages, so until like the 1300s, blue wasn't used much. It was a color, but in the West, it was kind of a non-color. You used yellow, red, and black. And then, because it was hard to produce and no one used it as a result, so it had no cultural significance. And then the high Middle Ages, the Virgin started being painted and religious paintings started being painted with blue. The King of France started to wear a lot of blue in his symbols and his robes, and production costs went way down and went way up. And so within like 30 years, a couple decades, it went from non-existent culturally in the West to being if you wore blue, you were affluent, you were healthy, you were educated. And so it's the same kind of thing today. So I'm paralleling blue and
internet access. Is that
internet access, working from home, whatever else, like from an identity perspective for enterprises, it's like, are you ready for this or you're not, right? We've shifted instead of 3 decades, we've shifted in like 3 months. And so how you doing? You know what I mean? Like in terms of like, how's that working out for you kind of a thing. So anyway, there's your random boring story from history. For the day.
I would expect nothing less. I would expect nothing less from Mike Kiser. I'm trying to turn on the do not. Here we go. Do not disturb.
I was like, are you texting while we're talking? No, I heard your phone go off.
Yeah, I'm trying to stop texting. While
Dave's like, yeah, I'm trying to get off this podcast. This guy won't stop talking. He's killing me.
Yeah. So, like you've obviously triggered an entire series of thoughts that I've had that I kind of want to dive into and have these conversations. I had both Wendy Nather and then Larry Whiteside in earlier pods, and both of them have been CISOs, right? And I kind of asked them the same kind of question, like, what would you tell, what would you tell somebody comes to you and say, I want to be a CISO, right? What would you say? I think that's to ask Larry, and then Wendy, I was like, what would you tell somebody who, advice to a CISO right now? And obviously, there was the first couple of jokes of, don't do it, or perfect timing.
Another one? Like, how far does she deliver to my house too? Like,
no, she doesn't deliver yet.
Did you tell her I know people at Soap? Oh wait, Jerry works at Soap. Dang.
Hey man,
anyway, I'm just kidding. Keep going.
So now I totally forgot what my thought was.
CISO, Wendy Nather, other than just run away, don't be a CISO. What would you do first, or advice?
Where I was going with that, between the two of them, the commonality, the pattern was mostly just understanding the entire landscape, right, of what you have to manage, and then specifically with Wendy about times right now is like you have to look at what's the most important thing for enabling your workforce, to do what they need to do. And so like, it'd be interesting to kind of further that now and kind of do a before and after, right? So, interview some CISOs and say, okay, so before March, right? And that's about what time the US kind of really started locking everything down. What were your plans? What were you looking at? What were you thinking compared to now, right? Has it drastically shifted your strategic plan, your yearly plan? Has it changed how you think about certain things? Because one of the things in situations like this, which sometimes can be good in the fact that when you're against the wall and you have to get something done, right? So imagine your organization is like, okay, look, we got to stand up VPNs, or we got to, whatever we need to do to enable people to work from home, and we got to make it happen like right now. number one, you find out how fast you can run a project, right? Like how quickly you can get things done. And sometimes though, that can become like, oh, well, we can do things in days. We've done it before. It's always somewhere in the middle. It's like, yes, that means you've got some efficiencies that you can probably work into your process, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you can do everything like super fast right away. So I would wonder what their analysis is looking back and saying, okay, have you figured out like ways that we can do things better, easier? Like, have you, I know in the first, couple of weeks and months, like, IT help desk people were just inundated, right? They were just working nonstop because all of a sudden you've got these people who've never worked from home. They're trying to set up, VPNs or trying to get into firewall or access different things. And, they're at home and it's just a total different environment. Right. And so, hell, like I've got a Zoom ticket right now that hasn't been answered in 2 months. Right. I'm just like, all right, at this point, they're just not going to answer it. They keep sending me an email. No,
you're an independent consultant right now. Yeah. So just saying, you don't really have a whole lot of pull. The Zoom ticket, right? I mean,
but still, I'm a pain.
I'm just saying. No, I mean, I think I've talked to a couple who, a couple of striking things. One was like probably at least a third of them said, I was either really glad or I was really frustrated that we hadn't done scale testing before this hit. They're like, you find out really damn quick.
Right.
What that didn't hold up. You know what I mean? Either with process or with just straight up, technology. Right. The other thing that's interesting is that there's a lot of people hiring contingent workers, which I had no idea was going to happen. In other words, brought on 2,000 people to handle. You think of especially retail, service, that kind of stuff. Yeah. Like they had to get a ton of people on. Now, if it's not a pure service industry, if they need machines, like there are some companies that are definitely still hiring, how do you onboard those people? If you're hiring like $2,000 new employees, how are you throwing devices out to all those? So do you let them go into their local Best Buy or Circuit City from 15 years ago and buy a laptop and then take it over? Like they're having to rethink, maybe BYOD is more practical. Now there's an illusion of control where if I own it, then somehow I feel it's more secure, which is probably true. But at the same time, your company, your employees, your customers are still going to access it from their phone, from their tablet. It's not, if you think that's the only way they're getting into your network, you're fooling yourself.
Right.
But that definitely elevates the device component as part of your identity. Right. Yeah. Like, cause now if it was there before, it was, but now it's definitely the way in. Right.
This to me pushes the whole zero trust model further than anything else. Cause this is the real life implementation of it. Meaning like, okay, now I've got workers that need to access whatever from wherever, where they are. Like they are not going to be from the network. They can be coming from a variety of different networks, depending on how they're set up. So I've got to be able to authenticate and authorize based on that. I can't, like, basically my network means nothing anymore, right? It's just like in a building nobody's going to be at. So great, right?
It's like taking an addict and saying, okay, you're one drug. No, you're not allowed to have that anymore. Now what are you going to do? I apologize for using that example. It's probably not a great example, but you know what I mean though, right? Like withdrawal, immediate, you're right. Immediate crisis, but also potentially immediate progress, right? Because now if your board, if your C-level exec, whoever has been dragging their feet on some of this, well, they're going to get on board now because they have no choice, right? So I think it's a moment to be seized. And if you're going to do that anyway, and if you're way, way behind, then why not leapfrog, what's existing and be more ambitious on some level?
And the interesting thing is, what I'm going to kind of pay attention to see if this starts to come out is that now you have, so with security in general, identity specifically, it was always hard to get like real valuable numbers that you could tie ROI onto, right? So now you can make the case like, hey, us implementing this and enabling people to work from wherever, having the right, identity systems in place to authenticate and authorize them and govern what they have access to, right? This allows us to be this more efficient as a distributed workforce, meaning we can cut 60% of the workforce that needs to actually be in a building, which means we can cut building costs. We can cut this. Like, you actually have some big hefty numbers that you can tie that to, which is going to be interesting to see if that starts to work its way in. Because I really do think that companies are gonna, they're gonna rethink corporate space after this. Well, number one, you're in the short term, you're gonna have to, because like you're not just gonna go back and cram everybody into an office building anymore, right? There's gonna be some kind of distancing, for the.
You're not going to cram me into an office building anymore. Right. With like 400,000 people or whatever. Right.
And so I think my hypothesis, what you're going to see is less real estate, more kind of open collaborative spaces. One, because you can actually space things out and kind of allow people to work in small, like little mini pods as they need to. And I don't know. I think a lot of people are going to get, the ones that can are going to get really comfortable working from home. Right. I can see the, for kind of families or different setups where it would be hard. Right. Especially with the kids out of school. Right. But if the kids are in school, it's maybe a little easier. But like if you've got homeschool, things like that, it's just going to be really hard to try and do all of that in a house. Right. It
is. Yeah.
Over the past couple of months. So, I just think I think we are going to see a drastic reduction in workforce actually going into buildings, and then companies are going to turn around and just like, okay, well, I mean, granted, it's not going to be immediate because most of these companies sign 5, 7, 10-year leases, so it's like, well, we're stuck with this space for the next 10 years, so we're going to do something. But I don't know. I think it's going to be. I'm definitely going to be watching that and paying attention. I do think you were going to see some changes there, right? And I think more the innovative and risk-taking companies will just be like, you know what, we're just going to. We'll cut it. We'll cut our leases. We'll do this stuff. We'll make like these kind of big collaborative spaces, and we'll just do that, right?
It's a cultural shift, and that's the part that's fascinating to me more than whatever IT or whatever, even identity technology perspective, like the blue thing, right? I find that fascinating because it speaks to how people think about their lives and that shifting. And that's just a lot more fascinating in general. You think about the blurring of, if you're working from home, if you're not on site, then you don't have that artificial 10, 15, half hour dividing line between I'm working and now I'm not working. And so I think a lot of people went through this wave of over productivity because they didn't have those delineation lines.
Right.
That's redundant. Didn't have that delineation between the two. And I think you're going to see that express itself in other areas too. Like not even just bring your own device, but also bring your own identity. If I'm culturally thinking in the same way that I'm always on, I'm always working, and I'm always doing my personal life, then why wouldn't my identity reflect that as well? And so, couple that with government initiatives to issue national IDs and that kind of stuff, I really see the model moving into, it's similar maybe to what Ian was saying. I haven't watched his presentation, but similar to an identity as in human or device, but in this case, we're talking about humans, human-centric hub and spoke model rather than an organization or enterprise hub and spoke model, which is a huge shift for everybody.
It is, right? And to me, I think the biggest hurdle to that is what's the trust entity to start with, right? There's not going to be enough trust in the government. There's not going to be enough trust in a private organization. But you have to start, and even if you want to do decentralized, like, okay, well, it's got to start with servers somewhere, right? And I don't know if it was you and I, but I know I've had this discussions. Like, so if we really break that down, like, who's most positioned to do that? You're going to look at either like finance, right? So you can look at the banks or something like that or whatever, or, the government, like somebody who's in a position that even if we wanted to say we want to change that and decentralize and give people their identities, like you need some kind of infrastructure to start proofing it and get it up and going. Like who has,
sure.
who has the most infrastructure, and then who has verifiable processes in place to be able to handle that, right? That's
Right.
You're not going to just stand that up tomorrow and be like,
no,
okay.
and a couple of years ago, I would have laughed at myself currently saying what I'm saying. So, true confession, right? But it's still the same issuers, right? It's still the government who has to validate where I live and where I pay taxes and
Right.
if I'm qualified to drive a car. But if you do it in such a way that I can just carry it around with me and use that and have, you're totally right. There's a lot of third-party infrastructure that has to be developed. The financial sector of all people are the ones who are innovating like crazy around this space, which makes a lot of sense on one hand and is bad shit insane on the other. Like you can scan your ID card in the UK and you can qualify for a business bank account in 15, 20 minutes. Basically, you say, here's my ID. Here is proof that I'm a officer of this company, and they will issue a business bank. Like there's so much innovation going on,
Wow.
but it's all based off of, okay, how do you prove to me? You're right, identity proofing.
Right.
And then do I trust that? And how do I trust it?
Yeah.
I was explaining to somebody the other day, I was like, if I had a driver's license and I showed it to you, you know what a driver's license looked like implicitly. And so if I drew one with crayon, you're like, moron, that's not a driver's license. I'm not insane, Right. So I still think we're like 5-6 years out, but I think I was telling somebody the other day, it's what we talked about before. It's the mobile device ubiquity, because now I have technology that's powerful enough to process the stuff in my hand. And then if I, in the words of Wendy Nather, if I democratize it enough that I don't have to worry about the technology, if your normal user doesn't have to know anything other than, they don't have to know how money works, counterfeiting. They don't have to know how a driver's license forgery prevention works. They just use it, right? So I don't know. Yeah. We'll see.
Yeah, we hit the same issue here with device though, right? Because not everybody can afford these things,
right?
And that, like, what's the baseline level that you put this out to, right? If it's got to be a smartphone, there's still sections of the world that people don't have smartphones, right? Like, so
true.
It's going to be an interesting time, man. And I
what's weird is they'll have devices before they'll have full-on computers.
Very true.
Right. So if we're talking about on-ramp, then yeah, smartphones aren't ubiquitous, but how smart does it have to be? Like there's a threshold there, right? Yeah, we're not talking about a Razr flip phone. Yeah, that's dead in the water. But
it doesn't have to be an iPhone, but like, so there's this company, and they're still around. It's called Blue, BLU, and they make Android phones, right? And they're fairly, they'll have like the latest, or maybe they'll have the latest OS for Android, but maybe a year or so behind, like on the hardware stuff like that, or whatever.
Sure.
But you pick up a phone for like $40, $50, something like that, or whatever. So, and it'll connect to Wi-Fi, things of that nature. So you can kind of get, there's where I'm going with it is there's kind of a model already there to have like, here is a base device and phone and specs of what you need to be able to do some of these things, right? And it doesn't have to be super expensive, right?
Right.
In fact, we should be able to make either close to either free or like $5 phones that just have what you need.
Yeah. When I was doing the DEF CON Black Hat stuff from last year as part of that project, now granted, I went to Target. Operational security sucks, right? Because there's cameras everywhere, right? Let's be honest. But I did the same thing when I actually went to Vegas to talk about this stuff. Like basically you can get a cheap phone on a cash basis. You don't have to show a line of credit. And so that already, I gotta believe that accelerates the process. I don't know. Who knows? But it's like you said, it's a fascinating cultural moment, right? Because half a year ago, we would not have, when we were sitting in Munich, last May, we wouldn't have dreamed, you and me, similarly drinking in a hotel bar. We wouldn't have dreamed that this would be a thing.
No.
So
not in the slightest. And it's so this podcast will probably air. No, it will air after it. But so the current episode that I'm getting ready to launch is with Tim Dickinson. And
oh, really?
yeah, like, so we were talking and he just kind of made this joke, like, dude, like, there's like, if you gave this to a Hollywood writer, just all of 2020, what was going to happen? Like, nobody would ever believe. They're like, yeah, whatever.
Too much. This is trying to pack too much into it.
Right. Like, it's just, you couldn't write this.
It's like, yeah, it's my oldest says, look, here's your Marvel movie. You start out, and if they don't have powers, they get powers. Something happens to them, and then you have a bad guy who comes in. It's like they kill a bunch of people, so they're bad. And then really, you can wait until about 30 minutes to go, and you'll have some fights, but you won't have the boss fight. He plays a lot of video games. You won't have the boss fight until right about 20 minutes to the end. And I'm like, that's pretty dead on, I mean, there are exceptions. Like Infinity War was just constant fighting. But at this point they go, is that the bad guy? Is that the boss? And I'm like, I'm not going to tell you. Just got to watch the movie, man. Anyway, but yeah, you're right. The 2020 has just kind of lost the narrative, lost the thread.
But with and I'm trying to frame this in quite the right way, and I'll probably mess up, but
No.
With disruption always comes the ability to innovate, because it forces you to think of new ways to do something, right? And you've seen, I think we've seen that throughout life, right? If you go back and you look at, extinction of the dinosaurs, cavemen, like there's always something that forces you to drastically adapt and change whatever your environment is. And this is one of those, as crazy as this thing is, right? And it is a pandemic, but it's causing us to look at so many different things and how we do them differently. Right. And so I do think out of this year, right, I'm a true believer, like nothing will ever be the same after this. This is a year, if I'm lucky enough to have children and grandchildren, that I will sit there and talk to my grandkids about. It's like, yeah, well, everything changed in 2020. Right.
I have to confess, I did not expect you to go all the way back to dinosaur extinction as your innovation example. But hey, that's, yeah, it's repetitive for sure. No, I think you're right. I mean, I think that, it's what's the old saying that, in economic downturn, innovation thrives, or something, where, a lot of startups came out of, they got nothing to lose and new ideas, and let's try it. And if it works out, fine. If it doesn't, it moves people in ways out of their stasis and out of their lethargy that other ways don't. Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Well,
I mean, look at you. You started a podcast. Was that this year or last year?
The podcast started this year. It launched in January.
See?
Right.
So cause, effect? Like, it's hard to say. Have you thought about stopping? Because, that might benefit us all. I'm just throwing it out. These are just words.
Good point. All right. Aggregators, you heard it here first. The Cocktails, Code, and Conversation podcast caused COVID-19.
Just it's not admitting fault. It's just positing it might be possible.
Right. It's correlating factors. Right. Let's have a time down with this. Yeah,
I can produce a chart later on if you need one. A big graph with some lines. It'll be great. See, it'll look a lot like this, except more in the downward slope.
Just more in the downward. Yeah. It's like, okay.
Yeah.
World.
Is it? I was gonna say, is it too soon? Too soon for that? Little bit.
We'll see when this hits the interwebs.
Well, it's been nice working where I do. It's been nice knowing you.
I get 100 angry emails.
Hey, but controversy sells too.
Apparently.
Well, so I hear. Oh man.
So 2 points, and then we'll shift to kind of the final segment. But one, as we were talking, I thought the other thing that was interesting with all of this was the ability for businesses like retail businesses, restaurant businesses to have to suddenly adapt, right? And it was like, okay, you had to go to a pickup model or a delivery model, right? And so you saw an increase, DoorDash, Uber Eats, all these, Favor, all these type of, apps saw, I would assume they saw an increase in people signing up, like the restaurants signing up to work with them, restaurants having to all of a sudden do online ordering and things of that nature. So again, just kind of that like disruption causing, people to react in different ways. Like I find it like we had gotten very comfortable with the DoorDashes, the Uber Eats of the world where you could like order different food, but you would always wonder like, well, why doesn't this restaurant do it or things like that or whatever. This happened. It's like, why would you not always offer the ability for your food to be delivered? Right. I mean, it's in a normal world, it's a way to increase a revenue stream, right? Maybe people don't want to have to come out, but they love your food and they can order and have it to the house now, right?
But isn't the discussion though in part though that the middleman is exploiting the creatives, so to speak, like DoorDash, Uber Eats, these, not to spike any potential sponsors you might have in your podcast, but aren't they? I've seen hints, at least on Twitter, of companies like DoorDash and these others charging relatively high delivery costs that cut into the profits of the business. Now, I assume they're still making profits. I don't know. But when demand is that high, it seems really easy to take advantage of too, right?
That's true, right? And that's, to me, I look at it, that's always the dangers of capitalism, right? And I always defend it and tell people there's a difference between capitalism and greedy capitalism, right? Capitalism is the ability to have a free market, a low barrier to entry for anybody to be able to take advantage of the trade of goods and services, right? Anybody should be able to go and do that, right? And have the freedom to do that. So in this case, as a restaurant owner, like there's a service that you necessarily don't want to pay the infrastructure and do the time of doing, but somebody else is willing to do that. And so you trade that service. Where greedy capitalism is to this point, there's a high demand, so we're going to charge even more. And so, yeah, that kind of, it kind of sucks, but I think, but so to that point though, they go, okay, well then I don't like this, right? It's charging me too much. Now it's like, okay, well then maybe I do make the investment and do this myself, right? It does at least still spurn the innovation to go, okay, well this is needed and I need to be able to deliver this, right? What ways can I go and offer this if I don't like DoorDash, I don't like Uber Eats or whatever? Okay, fine. But let me get an online ordering system. Let me put that together, right? And then maybe I'll just, I have the two chefs, and now I don't maybe have to fire my waiter or my wait staff. I can say, hey, you got a car? Can you just go drop these things off?
And that to me as a consumer, that sells a lot better. Like if I feel the person delivering is part of the organization, then I feel, in part because of what I've read, but also I just feel this greater pull to use that method and to crazy tip, just because I feel like I've identified with the place I'm eating at because I like what they're offering. And so as part of that, I extend that, and it's fascinating.
So I forgot what the second point was already, but I have another one. What happens? So with all this, I have discovered Marco's Pizza.
Oh, I've heard about that place, but it's up north, right?
I guess. I don't know. I mean, I'm up north, and it's
I was gonna say,
dude. Oh my gosh, it's not okay. It's compared to, I would put it like, so there's a Domino's, a Papa John's, and Pizza Hut, and all this stuff. Whatever. Right. All right.
Yeah.
This is more. It's more like true Italian based, right?
Yeah.
It's still fast foodie-ish, right? It's not it's like a straight Italian Neapolitan pizza, but it is like the ingredients that they use, the dough they use. It's so much like I am a fan. I am a huge fan. They have, matter of fact, Marco, if you're listening,
I was gonna say sponsorship opportunity, right?
sponsorship opportunities like all day long. I will take it. Let's talk. Marco's Pizza, Austin, Texas. 2 thumbs up, man.
Well,
It beats-
sales,
I put it like this.
sales through the roof, right,
Right,
there.
right, exactly.
Yeah.
It beats Pizza Hut, Papa John, Domino's hands down.
Oh yeah.
I wouldn't put it up against like the Mod 512. Like I wouldn't put it up against those type of pizzas because that's a lot more kind of like craft. That's probably not the right term that I'm thinking.
There's a place in Dallas Fort Worth you should go to if you ever get up there. Like, I would kill a person for. I'll probably not kill a person. It depends on who it is, how much effort it is. Yeah, I mean, it's a lot of work. Let's be honest. Garbage bags, whatever else. But yeah, it's really good. You'd have to live really close for delivery, though.
I was gonna say the best pizza I've ever had was wasn't even in Miami. It was Fort Lauderdale.
You're not exactly helping your case here. I just want to point that out.
What's the other?
Tampa Bay.
No.
Tallahassee.
No, there's a what's the? It's whatever city's closest to. There's another airport that you can fly into. You can fly to Miami. You can fly to South Florida. I want to say it's Fort Lauderdale.
Yeah. Naples, Fort Lauderdale.
Okay.
There. Yeah.
So that's what it was.
Back when we flew.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. Back in my day, when we actually got on these cylinder things and 300 people and we flew places, like, what, Grandpa, you telling me? Like, 300
yes.
people?
Kids, I was always in the exit row, and if I wasn't, I complained. Yeah, I remember this.
But that I had flown to Miami and to fly back out of Fort Lauderdale. So I went there early and I found it was just a little typical story, right? It's a hole in the wall place. And I hate to call it a hole in the wall describing, like, let me do mom and pop better because it wasn't a shabby place.
Yeah.
Place.
Yeah.
But Italian owner, he just, told me that him and his family had, migrated from Italy when he was young, and his dad, taught him, how to make these pizzas. He would fly back to Italy. He had all these stories when he would go, and his grandmother would show him all this stuff, whatever. So he opened this restaurant, and so he was like, "Have you ever had real Neapolitan like pizza?" I was like, "No." I was like, "You mean?" And of course, I offended him. I was like, "You mean like Domino's or something?" He was like, "Oh, no," and he just said, "Sit down," right? And it was a perfect time because it was like random. It was like 1 o'clock on a Wednesday or some crap like that, like just.
Right.
And so it's like me and like 2 or 3 other people in there. Nobody else was ordering. So he goes through, explains to me this whole thing, makes me this Neapolitan pizza, and I'm just like, it was
ridiculous.
What in the world? I've never tasted anything like this before. Like Domino's, Pizza Hut, they show
what was
business. Like
what was on it? What was on the pizza?
So it was prosciutto. And he put like this, he kind of sprinkled some arugula, right? Like it's kind of almost like like a side to it, but it was like you kind of sprinkled it on like in the middle, but it some very thin cut fresh prosciutto. I forgot what the cheese was that was on there, and then olives. And everything just fresh.
You're like shoot me now. I'm
right?
done.
I'm good. I'm good. I'm good.
Every day for the rest of my life.
Yeah. So it definitely that stuck with me. Obviously, it added Italy to my list of places to go that I haven't been to yet. But when travel opens up again.
Well, Italy's better off.
I feel comfortable traveling again because I don't know if I'm going to be anytime soon.
Yeah. Well, Italy's better off than the States at this point.
Really?
Oh yeah.
Well,
they've already been through it. You know what I mean? And not that they have communal immunity or anything like that, right. But they're. I pay attention way too much to graphs. Let's just say that.
Yeah, I had to just kind of zone out from a lot of that stuff.
Yeah.
But so we're gonna wrap up here, man, and we always end on the same segment every time.
Oh, yeah?
It is called The Last Sip. All right. So as we wind down here, take the last sip of our cocktails. Every podcast is the same way, the same question.
All right.
Mike Kiser, what do you want your legacy to be?
Fascinating question. Wide open, I assume?
Wide open.
I want people to say that I encourage them because I suck at it. In part. Like I have been given a lot of resources, whether it's genetic or through parents or just straight up being white. And I don't say that from just the current environment, but just in general, right? And so I think whoever has been given power needs to use their voice to give it to those who don't. And again, I say that because I also suck at that. But it's still my ambition. So I think encouragement and enablement of others, I think, is a large part of it. And just there are cliches we could use, but those are probably the most straight up terms. To make an impact on people and to have them feel, just encouraged and enabled.
Okay, so usually I end it there, but it's you. I'm going to pick on you. I'll take it a little further. So since you say you edit, Mike, what are you doing what steps are you taking to improve, to try and get better?
Okay, I am cynical as the day is long. You know me, right? If anyone expresses opinion, what am I going to say? I'm going to say, really? Really? So part of it is just shutting up and asking questions and letting people say what they think without being challenged. And that can get out of control, but over time, and this is, a lot of, obviously this is when theology stuff integrates back in, right? Because I don't think, a lot of it boils back down to what your view of humanity is, right? And mine is cynical, but I think in an appropriate way. And I include myself in that cynicism. So I think I'm being changed over time to ask questions, to listen, to not immediately jump to here are the 15 things that I think are maybe wrong or weak in that assessment, because people's reality is real to them. And so I want my first reaction to be, that's a great idea, and here's why. I was wired as, well, not by my parents, let me be very clear, just in general, multiple influences, to be amazingly competitively driven so that I want to win against other people. And so not winning and being defenseless is a choice that I can make. And that's a choice I want to make. So especially in this cultural moment, I think ceding power and giving up what people may feel like, or what I may feel like is what I deserve or what my right is the appropriate move. Again, very hard. Does that make sense? But to say, look, I've worked really hard at these 15 things. And so, if you have the opportunity to have a platform, to step aside and have someone else basically just hand it to them, if possible. And that's like a step further than just what I would call justice or equality. Right. It's something more than that.
I think what I'll say is, as a society, which is what has been a stereotype of American capitalism, is this feeling of competition that we do have to compete, and that in order to get everything I want, I've got to beat the other person to get there. Yeah. Right.
It's zero sum.
Right. Yeah. And what gets lost in that is that because if we really are the greatest country in the world and have the greatest opportunity, what gets lost in all of that is that there's plenty for everyone. That regardless of where I am and the platform that I have and whatever advantages that I have, that it's okay that I can stop and say, hey, yeah, I'm going to compete with, as long as my opponent is equally, on the same standing as I am, then we're going to compete and go at it. But when I come up across an opponent, or even not an opponent, if I see somebody else is not quite there, that it's okay to go, you know what? I've gained a lot. Let me give this other person a helping hand to come into this same category that I'm at, and then we go compete together again, right? Like that other part gets lost in it. Is that you can still compete, you can do everything you want to do, you can go after whatever you feel like the American dream is, but you don't have to step on the necks of people around you to do it. You can go, here, let me help where I can, and then look, if all things are equal, I'll see you on the battlefield, right? If we come and compete, but now that I know that I've helped and spread that off, and we're all helping each other get to the same point, there's enough for everybody, right? And while you will find that narrative if you if you study successful people, you read the books and stuff like that, and you listen to what they talk about there, you will find that narrative of that they realize that they get to where they are at some point by their own merits or things like that. But the exponential of it, that kind of would push them, is when they learned that I get more the more people that help, right? The more things that I can do, the more people that I can influence or help, like it just starts to increase what I currently have. So yeah, and you can, here we go. Shameless plug, non-shameless plug.
Uh-oh.
You can learn about that from great authors such as
Gosh. Well, and I no, I haven't read it. Have you read it?
I haven't read it either. I've started it, but there's about 5 books in front of it that I need to finish. But it is on my summer list of readings, just to get through that.
I mean, I think I want to circle back to what you said, and feel free to edit this out, or whatever. Like, my goal is not a level playing field, because I don't want it to be about me. And I am so wired that way. And I know myself that even if I'm on the outside, people think, oh, he's just doing a good job, I'm competing internally. And that's a dead end street, right? Because my past success isn't enough, and my potential failure is staggering. And so I'm not going to win either way, right? My last speech, or my last talk, or my last novel idea, it's not going to last me more than max like 2 or 3 months. I'm being generous. And my potential disaster is just looming around the corner. And so my identity, which I'm always thinking about, can't be located in how I'm doing. My identity has to be centered in something else. And when I'm doing that well, then that frees me up to have it not be about me, right? And then I mean, you know me pretty well. Like when I'm at my best, when my worldview is correct, then, and it has to do obviously with my theology and my faith, right? Then my identity comes from that, and so I don't need to prove myself,
right?
I don't need to get what I deserve, because what I deserve is not good in my worldview, right? I don't want what I deserve,
right?
And so if I see myself and I see other people through that lens, then I become an encourager, and I become a good listener, and I become someone who says, I don't need this. Not that I'm not knocking ambition or being an entrepreneur or any of that. That's not what those are two different spheres. For me personally, though, it's such a knife edge that I need to be pushing others forward and stepping back, because that's not my tendency. That's a long-winded version.
I mean, Mike, everything with you is a long-winded version.
Truth.
But I always love it, because it's always full of good detail and good nuggets, I will say. So with that, sir, we'll wrap this bad boy up.
All right, man. Thanks for having me. Yeah.
Thanks for being on the pod, man. I'm telling you.
That's fun.
Gonna try and make sure that we are. The last 2 months have been cool because I've been doing the one episode every week.
Yeah.
So far, I keep up with that pace. So gotta keep it going.
Yeah. Well, helps to have people.
It does help. It does help to have people. So all right. Awesome. So with that, everybody, we're going to be tuning out. Thanks for listening to the next cocktail, to the next conversation. Guys, stay safe out there.
Thanks for listening to Cocktails, Code, and Conversation, brought to you by the On the Corner Podcast Network. Check out onthecorner.us for all of our latest episodes and podcasts. Also, check us out now on the Podbean app, as well as all your other favorite places to download podcasts from. But you can check us out on Podbean, Cocktails, Code, and Conversation. New website, c3.onthecorner.us. So, to the next cocktail, to the next conversation, stay safe out there.